My name is Isabella Brook. I'm a member of NLS, National Labour Students, and I am a counsellor on the SRC. I'm one of the welfare officers, and I'm also on the general executive.
Imagine you have to cut $50,000 from the SRC's spending.
Yep.
Where would you save that money?
I think... tough one. I guess without having seen directly kind of like what the budget is and how people have spent money this year and that kind of thing, I think I'd be very hesitant to cut money from any of the student services. So I wouldn't be looking to cut money from like the legal service or the casework service or that kind of thing. I know there was I love ONI. I know there was a kind of a revision done into ONI and the circulation of ONI and how much of that is getting picked up and that kind of thing. So maybe having a look at that and seeing if the circulation of ONI and the current circulation of ONI at the moment is at the right level, and if there was some kind of we're publishing too many, maybe reducing that a little bit, but only if the report was to say that that was an issue. Otherwise, 50,000 is just so much. I'm not keen to cut collective budgets. I know there are some collectives that have larger budgets and don't use all that money, but I still wouldn't be keen to cut any of that money. Yeah, this is kind of like a non-answer. I'm really sorry, but it's just super difficult to think of.
So if you had to make a hard call, which of those areas would you be most likely to cut that money from?
Yeah, I wouldn't cut it all from one particular area. I think it would be taking a little bit from certain places and seeing how that adds up, I guess, taking a little bit from here and there. Also, staffing of the bookshop. I know we hire quite a few casuals at the beginning of the years when we have hire periods, stuff like that, like trying to see if we need as many casuals as we do on at the bookshop, things like that. But I wouldn't take, I guess, $50,000 from one specific area.
Would rather cut from services and employment like the bookshop and ONI than collectives, even if those collectives don't use all of their budget.
It wouldn't be. Yeah, that's not what I would do. But if collectives weren't using budgets, that would be something I'd have to have a look at. I think without having the budget in front of me and seeing what was spent and what wasn't spent, it would be very difficult to say that's what I'm going to cut. ONI and the bookshop are incredibly important. But I think if there's discrepancies in how they're operating and how much money we're putting into them and what we're getting out of them, then that's something to look at, not necessarily something to do.
What would you do differently to your predecessor, Chloe?
I think I'd want to consult a bit more with OBs and see what collectives are saying are issues. I think Chloe has done really well at kind of feeling out what the general feel is and what the general issues were, but I would like to see a bit more consultation with collectives and OBs and other student groups on campus to see what specific issues there are that need to be addressed and then take them to the relevant kind of, meetings and that kind of thing.
Can you give a specific example or a case of an issue where you would be more consultative?
I guess this year, there was a lot of stuff happening around education and the restructure and the SCA closure. And I think what Chloe did, which is what she did, and she's doing it. Sorry, that just made no sense. But she kind of took the general feel of, what was going on. And, obviously restructure is not good for students and the SCA closure is not good for students and staff. And she then took that on. Personally, I would probably want to not spend forever consulting, but, talk to the education OBs and go to the education collective, see the issues, talk to SCA students, find out the issues.
So, imagine that ONI publishes an article that shames your faction and specifically singles out one of your best friends as incompetent and negligent in fulfilling their duties. As a DSP, what would you do?
I think as long as it's not defamatory and isn't going to get the SRC in any legal trouble, then, it's something that happens. Sometimes our best friends might be shamed. And you just, I wouldn't be someone to censor material just because it was someone close to me. I would just let my friend know, hey, this is happening, just heads up. But I wouldn't try to stop it. I don't think that's something I try to do, yeah.
Okay, so would you give your friend the heads up before the paper had gone to print?
Yeah, which I know is not allowed. But just as, I'm not telling them the content, but just like heads up, like some things are going to come out.
Other members of the SRC, including staff, have expressed concern this year that the president has spent a limited amount of time in her office. As if you're elected, you'll be paid a full-time wage. Do you plan on being in the SRC office from 9 to 5 every day, and how will you manage that commitment?
I wouldn't promise I'd be in the office 9 to 5 every day. I think that can sometimes, things can happen, people can be sick, that kind of thing. Yeah, I do think the president should be in the office as often as they can be, and I think that's their role, is to be in the office, and they're getting paid to do that. I'm not planning at the moment on studying over the next year, like possibly one unit. But yeah, my intention fully would to be in the office for as much time as I could be, and 9 to 5 ideally. Yeah, we're getting paid a full-time load. We should be in the office full-time. I wouldn't be planning on working to the point where it impedes on my ability to be in the office and do the job that I've been elected to do.
In the recent quiz that Ani just gave the candidates about the president's role, you were only able to name one committee that actually reports to the academic board. So given these committees oversee most changes affecting students, including special consideration and the whole academic restructure, and the president is required to sit on them, do you think this speaks to being unprepared for the job?
I don't think it's being unprepared. I think not knowing boards is just like a lack of working in that framework. I don't see how not knowing certain committees now is going to affect me if I'm elected, and when I know them and know how they function a bit better, yeah.
You were a welfare officer this year. What did you achieve in that position?
At the beginning of the year, I was on a simple extensions working group that was earlier in the year, which we only met twice, which was discussing the implementation of simple extensions across all faculties. That was a bit of a kind of sad kind of thing, that we had to see simple extensions be negotiated down to 48 hours at the cost of having them across all faculties. And I guess being in that kind of working group showed me how unwilling the university is to be there for students who maybe are falling through the cracks. So that's something I did earlier in the year. We also had our Krispy Kreme Donut Day, which was pretty cool. We called it our Welfare Day of Action, where we had a Facebook event which reached like 30,000 people, which I think is pretty good, because that's now like 30,000 people who know about the SRC. And on that day, we handed out SRC material, we handed out some petitions about the welfare cuts that were going on at the moment, and talked to students about that, as well as giving them free Krispy Kreme donuts. And also, I've been working a bit more broadly in my role as well as New South Wales Disabilities Officer for National Union of Students, and kind of working that in tandem with my role as welfare officer, and consulting a bit with the disabilities and carers officers, and seeing kind of the stuff that's going on with the disability system at the moment, and working a bit more broadly on the changes that are affecting students with disabilities at the moment.
When you applied for your budget for the welfare portfolio, you were required to specify individual projects the money will be spent on. What were these?
I guess me and Dylan Williams, who's my co-welfare officer, we had kind of sat down together and worked out some things we wanted to do. So one of them was the Krispy Kreme Welfare Day. Another thing that we had planned to do, which didn't end up happening, was actually like an enroll to vote type thing. It was enroll to vote and then, put the libs last type thing, which didn't end up happening. And moving towards the end of the year, we had specified we were going to do a stress less day, I think is what it was called, where we were looking to, get some therapy dogs on campus coming up to exam season at the end of this semester. And then also a Know Your Rights campaign was something we're looking to do.
So just quickly on the ones that didn't eventuate, why
Yep.
didn't they?
Yeah, so Dylan and I both got jobs at the exact time that we had planned to do it. We'd actually printed up, we had set up all the material, and we had printed out some of it, not all of it, which then got used to promote the NDA. We just both got jobs and then weren't able to be on campus to do things when we were planning on doing them, which was just unfortunate. And yeah.
So, this election, your chosen vice president is a Liberal. The last time the Liberals had any power in the SRC executive, they tried to remove the acknowledgement of country. So why are you campaigning with Liberals when your NLS colleague and current President Chloe said NLS would not do deals with Liberals?
I understand the concern around working with Liberals and the things that have happened in the past. I personally have sat down with Ed and we've had a chat, and I think a lot of our ideas about what we want to see the SRC do on a broader scale, so things like really, you know, keeping the student, like the important vital services, and, you know, keeping up good work around that kind of thing, and things like mental health. We really agree on those kind of things, as well as making sure that the SRC is accessible and is visible to as many students from as many faculties as possible. Having the Liberals support us and having other students support us is because we think we're the best people to run the SRC, and that's why we have done that. We had tried to work with other groups on campus, which didn't eventuate.
What do you say to the concerns that, you know, they might do things similar to trying to remove the acknowledgement of country?
The SRC doesn't fall and rise on the back of one person. I think that having one person on the executive means those things can be brought up, but it's not going to be something that necessarily happens. I guess the other thing is that I have a strong commitment to not let things like that happen, and I will be talking to Ed and making sure that things like that are not going to happen.
Why is Ed being promoted as a vice president on campaign material when that position is not directly elected by a student? He's
the vice president of SAS, and he knows he has reached with a lot of students, and I think we're just bringing awareness to the SRC and to the campaign itself, having his name on there. In voting for me and in voting for the Stand Up or Ignite teams, people will be voting for Ed to be VP. So it's just, I guess, a bit of, you know, letting students know that that's what's going to happen, but it's also to get a broader reach for the SRC.
Do you think you're more experienced than your opposition, Georgia Mantle?
I wouldn't say I'm more experienced. I don't think that's true at all. I think the nature of Georgia's role as General Secretary gives her more experience within certain frameworks of the SRC. So things like the budget and kind of like that kind of thing. She would have 100% more experience in that way, and 100% more experience in dealing with certain aspects of the role. I think in other aspects, we're probably on an equal playing field, things like working with collectives and kind of like advocacy stuff.
So if you acknowledge that Georgia's more experienced in some regards, how does that tie into you saying that Stand Up is running because you feel you're the best people to like run the SRC?
I think the role of president is substantially different to the role of general secretary. So having experience in that regard doesn't necessarily make you more experienced for the role of president. And I think the team we have behind us for the SRC and people who will be working within the SRC have a large wealth of experience in working for organisations and working for students to deliver results.
Your team, Stand Up, claims to have won 24-hour libraries for students. Could you explain this claim? How much influence did the SRC have in those negotiations, and how important were they in securing the library, the study spaces?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure, but the SRC played a role of advocacy in those negotiations and that kind of decision, and brought forward the idea that this was something that the students wanted and something that would, you know, really do good things for students, and that's kind of the role that was played.
But so if you're not sure how important the SRC, like whether the SRC was actually that important in claiming it, do you think it's still fair to claim that that is an achievement of Stand Up?
I think it's something that Stand Up campaigned around. I think you claim wins off, you know, whether things happen. If you campaign around an issue and that happens, then it's a win.
You're running a ticket this year called Stand Up for the Colleges, as well as Stand Up. And And so they're described as being, like, they describe the colleges as a unique and vibrant component of campus culture that's neglected by the SRC, and that they will make sure college students are represented fairly at the SRC. But other stand-up promotional material claims shining a light on the colleges and institutional sexism as an achievement of the stand-up team. Do you consider this to be inconsistent messaging around the colleges?
Yeah, I can see how it would be taken that way, but I think you can acknowledge the bad parts of something, and the colleges have a lot of disgusting, institutional bad parts, while still, saying that something is important. The colleges are important to a lot of students who, who are having to live far away from home, and I understand that not all students who live at colleges have that experience, but for those who do, the colleges do provide something very important for them. I don't see it as being an inconsistency, really.
Using the language of that ticket then, so how are the colleges being neglected by the SRC currently?
The SRC doesn't engage. We have residential colleges officers who don't engage fully with colleges, and I think we could just be engaging a bit more with the colleges and letting them know that we're here and this is the things the SRC does.
Okay, so what kind of form would that engagement take? Like, what do you mean by engagement in that sense?
Talking more broadly to college students, setting up, working with the residential colleges officers and setting up some kind of, activities that will engage college students. I'm not a college student, so I don't know what engages them. But yeah, I think consulting a bit more broadly with those office bearers who have that experience of living in colleges, and see what kind of things we can be doing to encourage them more to engage with the SRC. Yeah.
Ignite policy has multiple times mentioned counselling services as a policy statement. The SRC doesn't actually provide counselling services. So why are the Ignite team running on that as a promise? And is that indicative of a lack of experience or understanding on their part of what the SRC does?
Yeah, I guess first thing is that I didn't develop the Ignite policy. I worked very closely with the stand-up team to help them develop their policy, but it wasn't something I was involved in with the Ignite team. I know that the counselling services they were referring to were CAPS rather than SRC counselling services. I don't know if that is just the way it was worded that made it seem like that, or if they specifically referred to SRC counselling services, but I don't think that is what it was. And I just think the Ignite team, that's something they're very passionate about, is mental health and making sure that students have access to counselling services when they need it. Yeah, I don't think that is indicative of a lack of experience. I think it's just poor wording.
Sure. Okay. So most of your policies are fairly vague in their wording. So, for example, like, one is stand up for fair education, no to 100k degrees, yes to fully funded higher education.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose in the context of that policy, what does saying no mean? Like, how are you going to put these policies into practice? In developing that policy specifically, what I had in mind, I guess, was working with the National Union of Students, who have been running campaigns specifically about fully funding higher education, and the National Union of Students has defeated fee deregulation multiple times. So it was more broadly working in a national framework with the National Union of Students to achieve those kind of things. So put your hands